Hello, everybody. I'm here with Chris Austin from Explora Journeys, one of my favorite people in travel. We're going to talk a little bit about branding today. But first, Chris, thanks so much for jumping on here, taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely. Wonderful to be with you, and thanks for the compliment there. As being one of your favorite people in travel, I
Yeah.
love joining you, of course, for these conversations. And thanks to everybody that's joining you and I today to listen in as well.
Yeah. So, Chris, I know you have a long history in travel. You've helped build a lot of brands, most recently with Explora Journeys. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about sort of the building blocks of luxury brands. I know there's a lot of decisions that need to be made when you're putting together something like this. I was hoping you could give us some insight into those decision-making processes.
Yeah, no, I'd love to, and of course, I'll speak very much through the lens of hospitality. And I think as you're designing a new brand, and there's been a lot, of course, when you think of the hospitality industry, whether it's luxury land, as in hotels and resorts, brands there, whether it's on the ocean, commonly, of course, called the cruise segment, with our beautiful ships, etc. But it could be actually in tour operating or even in air travel. I think there's always an opportunity for creating a new brand, and I think it has to be a very layered approach. As a brand such as Explora Journeys, obviously it begins with a dream and a vision, which becomes a passion project, actually. And of course, for us, it was the dream and the vision of our family owners, the MSC group, the Aponto Vago family, taking that European culture. And of course, the gold thread of Swiss luxury as a brand. We're actually headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. But then I think you have to, at that very, very early stage, you have to validate if the brand that you're looking to create is actually going to resonate with people, is going to connect with people, not only actually your end user guests, Dan, but those intermediaries who are obviously going to promote, sell, book your brand. Very, very important, of course, the travel advisor community for brands such as Explora Journeys. So to validate, we actually went out and asked 20,000 affluent travelers. So we targeted to get the right demographic. Many of them were loyal lovers of the ocean, so they were cruisers, repeat cruisers, and some of them weren't. And when I say some of them weren't, they were travelers, of course. They spent an awful lot of money on holidays, on vacations, but they loved going to luxury resorts, luxury hotels, and they hadn't yet cruised. So we actually got insights from both types of travelers and also from travel advisors as well. And in a nutshell, they actually did validate exactly what the family were thinking of. From a ship, they asked to actually have a ship that was yacht inspired, and I think that's very different than telling us to build a yacht. They obviously knew that they wanted a ship. And the things that followed basically justified that, because they then said they wanted space, they wanted choice. And so, of course, if you're going to have plenty of space and you're going to have lots of choices, you sort of are going to have a larger ship. But they also said they wanted design and they wanted a slower pace. And those insights were, again, very much aligned to the family's vision. So, at that point, you're going to set a clear path and basically, finalize your objectives and know where you are going to sort of be, whether it's in 2 years, for launching, 5 years, 10 years. You've got to have that end goal, I think, in sight. And I mentioned passion because I think you can't bring a brand to fruition unless you absolutely are passionate about the brand. You've truly got to believe in the brand. You've got to be absolutely committed. And of course, you've got to surround yourself down with the very best people, because you can't do these things as an individual. You need a very good team. And I think whether that's, a smaller travel agency, I think, leaning into a smaller team is going to still produce great results. So whether you're a very, very large company like the MSC Group, which is actually the largest shipping company, in the world currently. So you take all of those things, and you basically start the building blocks of creating your brand. And of course, for us, Dan, and I think many of the people listening, our partners probably understand this now, that our true lens was set on luxury hospitality and not necessarily on luxury cruise. And then that has really led to create a brand that is appealing far more as more of a boutique cosmopolitan, ultra luxury hotel whose home is the ocean. But in everything we do, we sort of look through that true lens of hospitality, not just solely luxury cruising. And of course, I think one of the outputs of that then, Dan, is you get a differentiated product. And you're going to connect with travelers, guests a little differently, perhaps, and unlock opportunities that perhaps were not tapped into previously. Well, we know they weren't tapped into previously, and that's part of the reason why we created the brand and we created a differentiating, appeal, etc. And again, leaning into those pillars that we talked about now with space and choice, design, and of course that slower journey, slower pace, slow travel, which I think is a real trend actually at the moment. People are so busy in their lives that I think the slow travel trend is perhaps going to continue to grow as we move into the years ahead as well, Dan.
Yeah, and it was interesting to hear you talk about that process because I know travel advisors sort of on a different set of standards and different set of lines have that thought process in mind when they're building their own brands. And you mentioned the 20,000 affluent travelers you spoke to. That's probably a good idea for travel advisors building their own brand to do some kind of, maybe not at that scale, but some kind of focus group, some kind of market research, I think is really important. And I guess just speaking of market research, Chris,
Yeah.
I know a lot of questions advisors have also, not just thinking about supplier brands, but their own brands too, is trying to differentiate themselves in the market. And I know you touched on it a little bit, but do you have any words of wisdom there for advisors who are curious about how any sort of major luxury brand can sort of find the niche in the market and stand out from competitors?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely, and the art of listening plays, I think, a huge part of that. And as you're creating a brand, Dan, before you launch, it is all about the art of listening, yes. And you've got to have your focus groups, your advisory boards, your advisory circles, even just those one-on-one conversations to really understand what people want. But of course, once you actually launch your brand, you've got to add something to the art of listening, and that is the art of taking action. Because otherwise, if you're only listening and you gave me feedback and said, well, I think, you should do this as well, and it was a very sound, justified comment, if we didn't actually take any action, then what's the point of listening? You're going to sort of lose that trust, because ultimately a brand is driving towards achieving the ultimate trust. That drives the sort of ultimate in loyalty. We sort of say loyalty beyond reason. And of course, in our segment, then you'd have a very high repeat ratio, which of course for our travel advisor partners, there's nothing better than somebody just repeating and saying they're in love with the brand and we want to keep going and going and going and travel around the world, with a brand and a new brand such as Explora Journeys. But I think for a brand such as ourselves, we saw this opportunity, and when our travelers step on board the ship, often the first I giggle a little because it doesn't sound very humble, but we are humble. But the first word that comes out of people's mouths often is "wow," because they step into this beautiful, stunning lobby of the ship with a lobby bar and our journey, which is a retail space with 30 different artisans, with their retail items there. And the other side of the lobby are our monobrand Swiss watch shops, which of course are stunning and offer a lot of choice to our guests there. The design is also whether as you walk through the ship, there's it's a very harmonious sort of feel, calming, actually restful, and I think that's perfect for a holiday. People say the ship is incredibly elegant, and they're not going to walk into any space from a design point of view that doesn't feel spacious. Every guest, on our ships has the highest amount of both indoor and outdoor space actually in our category. And then this world of choice that they have, 6 full restaurants that feel like restaurants actually in our own hometowns and home cities. So, you've got to get the product right for the guest experience. But then I think it goes beyond in differentiation. And one of the ways we've done that as well is actually in nomenclature. And I think you can overwork that, Dan, and that's an area to be cautious of. You can't rename everything, and you've got to still connect with your, your guest or your travel advisor. They need to understand what you're sort of communicating, what you're
Yeah.
talking about. But I think nomenclature really does allow for a point of differentiation. And I'll give you an example. We don't talk about passengers, we talk about guests, which I think is very respectful. But then those guests are actually going to be served by hosts. So we don't call crew, we call them hosts. And I think that does two things. One, it basically, every single day when our hosts actually get up to do their work, they have an understanding of what they must be delivering every single day. If you're a host, it communicates that, but it also communicates it to the guest, a level of service. And our hosts are basically passionate again. They're true hospitality experts. They've been hired personally with interviews with the brand. In fact, we don't just use agencies and then take whoever the agency provides to us. We choose and select the hosts, and they're chosen not necessarily for skill set. They're chosen for that passion, that hospitality expertise, but also for their smile and their eye contact. And so actually, differentiation in the people. And I think for any brand in hospitality, you can build beautiful resorts, beautiful ships, very elegant, beautiful design, furnishings, but it is actually the people that make the difference. And we are being complimented, I'm very proud to say, now all the time about our hosts on board. But then there are simple little things that you can differentiate, whether in the guest suites, for example, whether it is the charging pads built into the nightstands, you just lie your iPhone or your phone on top of it. When you walk into the bathroom, you realize the bathroom floor is heated, which I can tell you, Dan, even in the hot weather of the Mediterranean or the Caribbean, is a very nice treat. You walk into the closet to where the vanity is, where you can sit down there, and you open the drawer and you'll find a Dyson hairdryer. You get up in the middle of the night and a little 3-second night light will come on and automatically go off again. So it's these little details that I think really, again, help to differentiate a brand, and create a very different guest experience for people. So again, a very layered effect, a very layered approach. There's no one single sort of, golden arrow. In fact, we're often asked, Dan, so what's your single point of difference? And we answer the question by saying our single point of difference is we have 100 points of difference. Please give us the time to tell the story, and you'll obviously understand. And I think I would finish by saying, if a brand doesn't have a solid story to tell, that's a differentiating story, then you haven't really created a proper brand. But a story isn't just in one sentence. And when people sort of look for that one thing, they're probably doing a disservice to the brand. And they need to be able to have the time to share the depth of story, the uniqueness of the story, and that translates to the uniqueness of the brand that obviously has been created as well.
Yeah, and it seems like you and your team very passionate about keeping things consistent, the small details, no details so small. You talk about the Dyson hair dryer. I'm sure advisors and your customers really appreciate that. Chris, we're almost out of time, but anything else you want the advisors or any of our audience to know about Explora Journeys? Anything that's coming up that you want to sort of pop into their heads?
Yes, no, absolutely. Well, Dan, we actually celebrated the launch of Explorer 2 in September. So we're now a fleet. We're not just one ship. So we have Explorer 1 and Explorer 2 currently sailing the Mediterranean, but they'll both be coming, of course, to the Caribbean for their winter, doing different itineraries. So think of us for those wonderful, wonderful winter itineraries in the Caribbean. Of course, festive. We are a young brand. We're a very new brand, Dan. So, of course, we've only been operating for over a year, so we do have space. We're not shy in saying to all of our travel advisor partners, we have space. So think of us still for festive, new year, and those winter 2025 journeys as well. And of course, you may have heard that we're delighted to have welcomed just over a month ago, Anna Nash, as our new global president. So I'm working very closely with Anna, and Anna came from Amman Resorts, and she's based in our headquarters in Geneva. And we're delighted to have Anna at the helm. And again, Amman Resorts, true luxury. And that shows and tells everybody here we are absolutely firmly set on delivering the finest luxury experience actually on the ocean. Think of us more as a boutique hotel, but we want to be great partners to our travel advisors and, of course, have a very long and healthy working relationship together, Dan.
Yeah, well, Chris, it's been so nice sort of seeing the brand roll out over the last few years to what it is today to the second ship. I know advisors are just as excited as we are, and yeah, thank you again for taking the time jumping on here. It's always great to get your perspective on things.
No, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. We look forward to welcoming your clients as our guests on board Explorer 1 or Explorer 2. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks a lot.
Ciao.